Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and in a previous video we showed you how to make these rag quilts using 10-inch squares, and they were just quick and easy to make. But we're going to show you an even quicker and easier way to make them today, and that's using these strips. So you can see here how lovely that looks, and I've just got a plain background on the back, and just look how awesome it looks. You can use all sorts of different colours. So let's get on and show you how to make it. Now this quilt is made from flannel, and the reason we use flannel is so that it rags up beautifully. If you use another fabric, you may find that it just frays and falls apart and you'll end up with nothing. So this is made from 3 layers of flannel. You can see here that I've used a dark grey on the back, and I've also used a dark grey in the middle, and that gives it that nice dark effect. Now on the front here I've used a variety of flannels, and I've also used a variety of sizes. But for the one that we're going to be making today, I've cut them all into one width because I want something easy and quick and easy to go together. So they're all 5.5 inches by the width of the fabric, and we know that's cut from selvage to selvage. And we've just cut our pieces. I've got 12 for my backing. Now remember, in my other quilt I have grey, and this one I'm going to use green, but you can use a variety of colours. You don't have to stick with one colour. And then I'm going to use a white for the middle instead of the dark grey. And I've got a variety of designs that I'm using on the front. I've actually got 3 different fabrics, and what I've done for this one is I've cut 5 in this peas in a pod fabric, I've cut 4 in the leaf fabric, and then I've cut 3 in the dots, and that's simply because that's what I had on hand. So as I said, I've cut mine to 5.5 inches. Now you can actually change the size of these strips to whatever you want. So if you were to cut this down to 3 inches or 4 inches, just remember that you need to cut the centre piece and the backing to match your front piece. Now you can see that demonstrated in the quilt behind me. I've got a small piece and I've got larger pieces, but you must always cut your middle and your backing to the same size as your front piece. Otherwise you're going to end up with a mess and it won't go together. So now comes the fun part. You get to lay the strips out in the order that you want them. So lay them out on a table or a workplace, and once you're happy with the result, simply pick up your strips and make sure that when you pick them up, you stack them in the order in which you've got them laid out, because that's how you want to sew them. You don't want to be mucking around sorting out, oh, this strip should have gone here and that should have gone somewhere else. So just do that, just simply go along and place your strips one on top of the other until you've got a pile. So I have my 3 piles of fabric down here now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the backs and I'm going to lay it face down on my workspace. Then I'm going to take one of the centre pieces. Now I have white, and so it doesn't matter which way I lay that down. If you have a coloured fabric, then you'll want to place that with the right side facing up. Okay, so you'd have the backing going down and the middle coming with the colour facing up. And then I'm just going to pop my front piece on there as well. Here we go. Now what you want to do when you put your 3 fabrics together is to make sure that the selvages match at one end. Doesn't matter about the other end, we're not going to worry about that because we're going to be trimming it all eventually. So just make sure that one end all comes together nicely like that. And do that with all of your pieces, because at the same end, so that you have them all on the one end running nicely. So as you can see, I have all my pieces sandwiched together, so each one has a front, a centre and a back. I've done that with all of them, so they're all in the order that I'm going to sew them, and they're all ready for me to just pick up and sew. So what I'm going to do first is take the first piece. Now we're not going to sew the first piece at the very top like we normally would. What I'm going to do is just put some clips on here. Now I've got these binding clips and they're really awesome, but if you don't have these, you can just put a couple of pins, and you don't have to worry too much about this. It's simply to hold it in place until I get the first 2 strips sewn together. So I'm just going to go along and just pop a couple of those on just to hold it all nice and neat. Just make sure everything lines up. Okay. Now remember I talked about the selvages. The centre's my selvage where they're all nice and neat. Now I'll take my second piece. Now normally when we sew, what we do is we put right sides together, but in a rag quilt you don't do that. We're actually going to put the 2 backings together. So I pick up my piece, my backing, and there. Now I'm going to put those together, and again I'm just going to clip them just so that they're nice and neat while I sew. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew right down with a 1/2 inch seam. Now we make it a 1/2 inch so that we've got a nice piece here to clip when we've finished it all. So 1/2 inch seam and all the way down to the end. Now remember, keeping all your salvages nice and neat at one end. Don't worry about the other. So as you can see, I've sewn these first 2 strips together, and there's my 1/2 inch seam. Now you can take your pins or your clips out of there now. It was just to hold it while we got started. Okay, so now what we've got, this is how our front looks. It says already the green is coming through. This is going to look lovely when it's ragged, and this is what the back will look like. Okay, so I've got nice neat seam on the back. So what we're going to do now is take our next strip and do exactly the same thing again. So we bring it together, keeping our salvages that we've got all matched at one end, and we place the 2 backings together. And again, we're just going to pin that all the way down, and I'll neaten it before I sew it, but I'm just showing you what to do. Okay, so now it goes all the way to the end, and again we'll sew with a 1/2 inch seam. Now we'll continue to do that with all of the strips that we have here. So I've sewn all my strips together, and now it's time to trim our quilt. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to flip it open here. Now you need to find your salvage that's the furthest in from the edge, because we want to trim all those salvages off. And remember I said at the start that the one end would have all different sizes, so don't worry about that. Now's when we're going to trim it up. So once we've found our smaller size, and it looks to me like it's probably this one here, we're going to get our ruler. Now I work from the back because I find it's easier for my ruler. From the front you've got all these seams to lay across. So here we go, I'm just going to line it up. Now take the time to line your ruler, one of the lines on your ruler along is a seam line, so that it's nice and straight. And just make sure that you've taken all of the salvage in, because here it looks like it's the lowest. Right, and just check, yes, I've got seam lines all nicely lined up. Let's bring that up. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut. Now because you're going through a number of lengths, just apply a bit of pressure on those seam lines, because you've got a lot of fabric there. Okay, so then I'll just move this up and do the same thing again. Line up my seam line, make sure I've got all my salvage in, and then I will just cut. And I'm also going to do the same on the other side. Now remember we had these fairly well lined up, so you're not going to be cutting off as much. So we've sewn all our strips together and we've trimmed them up, and it's all coming together nicely. So now what we need to do is sew a 1/2 inch seam around the outside edge. So we'll start in one corner and we'll sew up the edge, and as we come to our seams we'll just open them and sew them open. We'll go over them with the 1/2 inch. When we get to the end we're going to pivot when we get to a 1/2 inch from the end. It's not critical, it doesn't have to be exact, and then we'll just sew along the top. And do the same when we get to the other end. We'll leave the needle in the down position and we'll sew down, again opening our seams as we go. So I have now sewn my 1/2 inch seam all the way around the outside edge. You can see that here. And what we're going to do now is to rag this quilt. Now if you've got just scissors, then what you want to do is come in here, and you do these at about 1/2 inch apart and cut through the 3 layers, and then cut all the way along, because you may have trouble cutting through all 6 layers with scissors. So then you just cut again about 1/2 inch. But if you have some ragging scissors, these are awesome and they make this job go so much quicker. So what you do with those is I find it's easier just to get your quilt and lay it like this, so that you've got all 6 layers, and away you go. You can just cut through. Oops, just make sure that latches off. Now be very careful not to sew through your stitching. But look at that, see, it does both layers at once, no trouble at all. So we'll do each row, and then I'll come back and I'll do the, once I finish my rows, I'll do the outside edge. And that's all there is to it, and it looks amazing. Your next step from that is to wash it. And we find that 2 washes in cold water and then throw it in the dryer between, it helps get that raggy effect. Some people find that there's too much lint, and so they take them to a commercial washing and drying outfit, but I haven't had any trouble so far. I just throw them in my washer and my dryer, making sure I clean the lint holder out between dryings. And that will give you this awesome effect up here. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great tutorials, and follow us on Facebook and Pinterest.